Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 2023 NATS Chat. I'm Kari Ragan, the moderator, and I am so pleased to be here tonight with David Sisco and 𝗚𝘂𝗲𝗀.
Hello.
And
hi.
Before we begin, let me just start by saying that the 2023-24 season of NATS Chats are generously sponsored by Inside View Press. Please check out their book, Musical Theater Voice Pedagogy, The Art and Science by Christopher Arneson and 𝗚𝘂𝗲𝗀. And it is available for purchase at voxped.com or on Amazon. So back to our fabulous guest tonight, and we will be discussing your best 16 bars, developing successful tools for auditions. Such a great topic for our community of teachers, isn't it? Because we send our singers out to auditions all the time, and that is what determines a lot of their success. Work begets more work, begets more work. So I'm really looking forward to learning from you both tonight. Let's begin, like I always do, with a little beyond the bio. David, would you like to just share a little bit about what brought you to be where you are in our profession right now?
Sure. One of my favorite stories to tell is when I was in first grade, I marched up to my music teacher, Mrs. Goodwill, and I told her that I would be taking over her position upon my graduation from high school. I just knew, like from a very early age, that that music was what I was going to do. I didn't know I was going to be an educator as I got older, but I'm so glad that it's led me into teaching voice and being a vocal coach. Both of my parents are teachers, so I feel like it's very much in my DNA. In terms of what we're going to talk about today, I have adjudicated and played a lot of college auditions, both regionally and in New York City. I've also been part of casting process in musicals, college musicals, as a music director. I've also, with Laura, on a lot of these, I've either played or adjudicated professional auditions specific to new musicals, a handful of those. And my studio, both at NYU Steinhardt, where I teach, and then my private studio, I work with students who are preparing for auditions, either for college or professional auditions.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, David. I'm so thrilled to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
And Laura, share with us a little beyond the bio.
Well, David started in first grade. I guess I got a late start. Mine was my bat mitzvah. So they tell me that when I was standing up in front of everybody, most kids just raced through, and I kind of slowed down as soon as I saw the audience. So I started my career as a musical theater performer. I went to NYU as a musical theater performer, but quickly realized that was not the right place for me because I was watching everybody else and figuring out how their performances could be better and not spending too much time thinking about my own. So I next moved to becoming a professional stage manager. I worked Broadway and off-Broadway as a stage manager before moving into the field that had found me, which is directing. I'm an active audition coach. I have my own studio where I specialize in working with young artists in New York City, specifically students who are interested in auditioning for middle schools, performing arts middle schools, high schools, and then college. So, and my professional directing work has been both at the college level, but also regional theater.
Okay. Well, let's begin our deep dive in. I think let's start with the idea of auditions, and let's dive into the college auditions. First, David, do you want to talk a little bit about college auditions and what you see in that?
Sure. College auditions, I mean, I'm sure everyone who's seeing this will agree that college auditions, especially for musical theater programs, have become incredibly just competitive. And so I think with college auditions, it's really essential that students are learning how to present a vision of who they are through how they embody their songs and monologues. That's something that that we, both Laura and I, work on with our students, helping them understand, first of all, who they are at that age, which I think young artists of any age, that's always a challenge. But then how do they bring that lived experience and celebrate that lived experience. I think that's a really important aspect of it in their audition material. Again, whether it be songs or monologues.
And do you feel the college audition is significantly different? The approach that you take as the teacher to somebody who's preparing for regional auditions or professional level auditions?
Laura, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's different in terms of what they're preparing. I think the thing about a college audition that students need to really think about is the difference of when I'm auditioning someone for a show. You know, I'm going to be there for maybe 3 or 4 weeks working with them. A college is looking for someone not just based on their talent, because obviously at that age, part of why they're bringing you into their program is because they think you can learn and grow from their program. But they're also looking to find community members. So they're looking for people who are going to be a good part of their community. They're looking to fill a diverse class of people in all the ways that we are made diverse. So there's a lot of other things they're sort of looking for that really is not what would happen at a regional or a professional audition.
I think this is something that we'll talk about a little bit more later, but you know, with a professional audition, you know, you're given a very kind of specific set of guidelines through the breakdown, the casting breakdown, where that's not the case with college auditions. You know, usually it's 2 16 or 32 bars that college student, high school student has to prepare for a college audition, right? And so there's a lot. I think there's in that sense, there's a lot of flexibility too in what they can bring in. Whereas in a professional audition, you're having to really understand the tone and the musical world of the show, and consider those in terms of what you're going to choose to sing for the creative team.
Yeah, and just wrapping that back to what David said, that is actually usually the biggest challenge for the young performer, because they need to figure out who they are. They need to figure out what they want to bring into the room for that adjudicator to see, right? Because you don't have that parameter. So what we were recommending is figuring out who you are, instead of trying to figure out what they want you to be, which you can never do. It's figuring out who you are and what you want to bring to show the school about who you are, and finding material that really speaks to that in all of the ways you can do that, by finding material that's age appropriate, you know, race appropriate, gender appropriate, all of those things that affirm your own identity.
A lot of our NATS members, of course, teach high school, junior high, who are doing auditions for their school or in their community. Anything specific about that age group that is we need to mention? As you see, is there a big difference for that approach?
I mean, there's not a difference really. I think it's just that age, I find they need more guidance. For most of these students, especially if they're auditioning for college, for a lot of them, it's their first big audition in their life. They may have done school plays, but you know, the drama teacher and the high school chorus teacher know them. So this is the first time they're walking into a room where they don't know somebody. It's so high stakes. So I think it's, you know, I spend a lot of time, and I know David does as well when he prepares students, kind of walking students through that whole process, because I think the whole audition itself, just the notion of walking into a room, being adjudicated, listening to someone who might give you an adjustment or ask you a question, how to be in that room and be present and, you know, live in that moment, which is something, you know, it sounds like, okay, that's outside of our parameter as teachers, but that's actually something that we can bring them. So David and I talk a lot with them about, you know, doing everything, walking through everything that might happen in an audition room, from the moment you walk in till you say goodbye and thank you, to when you leave and write a follow-up thank you note.
Yeah, that's just to piggyback on that. I have so many young artists who are auditioning for college. I'm like, please practice talking to the pianist as often as you practice your song, because so many times they get completely unraveled about giving their tempo and showing the cut and things like that, that all of the work that they did to prepare, right, for the actual audition then can so often go down the sink if they haven't been practicing that, right? So I think there's that with high school students, helping them understand that everything that they need to practice, everything that they're going to do on audition day, not just their material. The other thing that I just want to hit home again a little bit more is that this idea of kind of claiming, having a young person claim their agency. And I love what Laura was saying about, you know, we've often said the student is auditioning the school as much as the school is auditioning the student, right? And so, so really reminding the student of that and having them choose material based on that, having them go in with a sense of pride of what they get to show of themselves, right? I think that's a little bit different. I mean, I think that applies to professional professional performers too, but I think more so that's something that young performers really need to hear. If that makes sense.
It does. A couple questions. The first is, how do you guide your high schoolers with big aspirations who are doing these college auditions with 900, maybe it's even gone up since, you know, to 1,200 applicants for the top programs? So they might be super talented and go on to have a great career. They may not get into one of these schools. So any advice from either of you? What kinds of conversations do you have with them, or do you just let it roll so that you don't put any negative thoughts in their head?
I mean, I think part of it is, like David said, just practicing this whole day. You know, we talk to our students a lot about, you know, from talking to the pianist to walking into being present when they ask you questions. You know, a lot of times these college adjudicators will spend some time chatting with the student, and so many of our students are so nervous that they can't kind of be present enough to just kind of, and that all they're trying to do is get to know you. So they may ask some very silly kind of icebreaker questions. Get them used to that in lessons, you know, to take some time to kind of ask those silly, those questions, you know, who's your favorite performer? What was the favorite role you ever played in a show? Like, just do that at every lesson with them. And then also do things like adjustments, you know, because that's another thing that they might ask. And again, sometimes they're just asking that, as I do it at any, you know, even at a professional audition, I'm doing that to see how well they can listen and take adjustment. So if a student is too nervous and too their anxiety gets the better of them and they can't be present enough to do that, that's going to kind of work against them. So the more we can practice those things as much as, because I think, as David said, so many students spend so much time just on their material, which is of course important, but they really need to think about it, the audition, as a whole day. And that extends, you know, to everyone who is in the building, you know what I mean? Like, you know, we talk to our students all the time too, of like, if your parents come, be careful who they're talking to outside. And the monitor might be a student who graduated last year, and, you know, the person who signed you in. So like, you have to just think about the whole day as an experience. And, you know, I like to say to my students, your goal for this day when you go in an audition is to walk out and say, you know what, that went the best I've ever done, or I feel so good about that today. I sang that the way I wanted. I presented myself the way I wanted. I loved the way I listened to their adjustment. That's when the audition was a success, because that's what the student has control of. You have no control of what's going on the other side of the table, which may have zero to do with you. You know, they may have loved you, but they already have 6, you know, white soprano females in their class. So, you know, they're going to have to choose. So that doesn't mean they didn't like you or don't think you're talented. So you have to realize you can't take that into consideration. All you can control is your own performance and how you present yourself in the room.
Yeah, so well said.
Good. The other question before we move on to repertoire, which will be a big conversation, I know. So like, let's get it all in before we move to rep. I had a student recently who was called back from Seattle, called into the finals for a New York audition. And, you know, the advice was, make sure that you show who you are, like that you really make an impression. And they weren't talking about the singing. I mean, of course, that goes without saying. I thought, how does one do that? How does walk into a room and out of a room in 1 minute? You're not supposed to talk to them. You're not going to go shake their hands. You're not going to, right? All those things. In fact, we may want to mention those little details, but you know, you're not going to go up to the table and shake everyone's hand. And right, when you talk to the pianist, it needs to be very quick because you're trying to get to your 16 bars. So what, in 60 seconds or less, how do you both sing your 16 bars and somehow show a personality outside of the moments that you're singing enough that invites them to want to know you?
So this is something that I think it's really hard, because being in front of the table can seem like it's impossible. How could anyone possibly know in such a short time? We can attest, Laura and I, that being behind the table, being behind the piano, like we know within the first 10 seconds. And so much of that, I think, is how they show up in the material, right? Quick story about the musical theater industry. You know, we are finally, after far too long, moving away from the idea of character type, which we know has been used as a gatekeeping device, keeping different people of intersections of identity out of the center of the story. And what is being replaced by that is this thought of essence, which we define as the rich qualities and singular experiences that make a performer unique. And so part of the answer to that, I think, Kari, is how does this material show who I am? So this summer I was working at NYU, had a musical theater summer workshop, and I had a phenomenal mezzo, 𝗚cie𝗀𝗁𝘂, who just was so bubbly and personable and warm. And when I do repertoire, I always pitch 3 songs and say, if any of these speak to you, great. If not, well, you know, I'll let you pitch songs to me. And so one of the songs I pitched to her was For the First Time in Forever from Frozen, because it's such an exciting and excitable song, and she gravitated to it. And when she performed it on the final performance, it was electrifying, because that was who she was, right? She was able to understand her essence and bring her essence into her own lived experience into the song. And I think that has a huge, that's a huge part of what it is to make an impression. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And some of it is that 𝗓𝘂 sais quoi that we can't teach. That some people are just more able to embody themselves in different circumstances, I feel.
But that is something that I work with students on, because part of what that is how do you bring yourself into a room? And part of that is, I mean, it always sounds so counterintuitive, but I work with my students to say, I want you to walk into that room as calm as you can be and as yourself as you can be. And that sounds, people say to me, oh my gosh, how can I do that? I'm so nervous. And I said, well, that's something you work on. The nerves is an adrenaline rush, and you need to learn how to use that for good, you know, so that you can walk into a room, bring that personality. So when you walk into the room, it is, hello, how are you? When you see the pianist, hello, how are you doing today? You know, and giving them your instructions to the pianist, so that there is that sense of yourself and warmth. I mean, and that's something David says. I mean, something I can immediately sense. Sometimes people say, you know, how do you know if you know, it's going to be a performer you want to work with? And I said, that 𝗓𝘂 sais quoi is sometimes very, very telling. And after doing what we've been doing for this long, when an actor in an audition is not bringing themselves into a room, or they have something that they feel a little shut down, or, you know, I'm not getting that back and forth. That is to me, that's something that's a red flag to me. So
Okay.
It is partly about teaching yourself, or for us teaching students if they're younger, and that is part of it is just practice. It is practicing the whole process of what you're going to do. You know, a lot of people don't do this. Practice walking into a room. How do you open a door and walk into a room? Where do you go first? walk into a room, you say, hey, everybody, how's your day going? Walking over to the pianist. As you're walking over there, then you speak to the pianist, then you walk center, then you look, catch everybody's eye. Hey, are you guys ready? Great, I'm ready to start, whatever that is. If you can start to do that, saying thank you when you leave, thank you to the pianist when you pick up your book. Those little moments of authenticity, if you can make them authentic and real and feel like you're sharing yourself in the room, that will go a long way towards us being able to understand who the essence of who you are. And as David said, the other piece of that is picking material that further tells the story. So if your material, now you've been this bubbly person and then you walk in and you're super friendly and whatever, that's just gonna, now I know who that person is. Now I have an idea of who that person is.
Laura, do you want people, as they hand their music to you, I would think you wouldn't want people saying, hi, how are you? Because you're not going to have a real conversation. So it's kind of an inauthentic question in some way.
I disagree. I mean, I use it to kind of gauge. I do use it to gauge because I do feel there's people who are very shut down or people who can't seem to do that. To me, somebody who walks into a room and doesn't catch my, or even starts their song without looking at me. If I'm sitting taking notes in my book and they don't even look to catch my eye before they begin performing, that just strikes me as odd, right? You want to know you have my attention or that you've connected with me, even for that brief little moment. You need to grab, like, you have that 60 seconds or 2 minutes. You need to figure out how to maximize every single moment you are in that room. From the moment you walk in until the moment you leave.
Okay. I wanted to say that I 100% agree with that, but this is also, I think, a really good place to just mention something that we were saying in the dressing room, as it were, which was, Laura and I have been doing auditions in professional and academic arenas for 20 plus years. We won't say how long beyond that, but a while. And so we're bringing our knowledge of that based on our experience. But every room is going to be different, right? And so, and that's the other thing that I think is really important, that I feel like everyone's looking for some sort of magic potion or magic, like if I do A plus B plus C, it's always going to work out. And that's actually not true. And that's what makes, I think, auditions really hard. And one of the things that I heard somebody recommend that I think is really brilliant is, especially for professional auditions, if you're going into, like, for instance, you're going into a particular casting agent, all right? Well, I have students and clients now who keep track on index cards of, like, oh, I'm going in for 𝗚cie. Okay, what's the room like when I go in there? Is it really warm? Is it jovial? Or is it just like, we're getting to business, right? And so much of that is within the performer's control. Obviously, that's not the case with college auditions. It's, you're going to see these people probably once over the course of the day. So it's a different dynamic. But for those professional auditions, you have an opportunity to develop relationships with these casting directors. And so I think it behooves the performer to really understand and, again, claim their agency, understand how much control they do have.
I appreciate that, because I could just see handing the music to the pianist, you're focusing on, I want to show them in the music whatever I need to show them, set the tempi, whatever, and the, hi, how are you? And if the pianist is thinking, well, that last singer's music was an absolute mess, I'm a little bit mad right now, right? They're not gonna respond like that. So I appreciate, though, that moment of humanity, every moment of humanity, and to personalize the experience and show that you are present enough. That's what I'm hearing you both say, that I am present enough, even in my nervousness, to say, hi, how are you? Thanks for playing for me today. That probably goes a long way.
Yeah, and also to realize that, for college auditions and professional auditions, this is a two-way road, right? If you walk into a room and there's a director or a college professor who's giving you nothing and is rude, or you're getting that from, I mean, that's for you, that's information for you too. Like, maybe this is not the place for me if I'm not getting anything back, or these people are disrespectful of me or my material or what I'm sharing in the room. It's a very vulnerable thing as a performer. I love performers, and I try to be my most professional with every single person who walks in front of me, no matter what I'm feeling or what I think of how they come into the room. So if they give that to me, then that's information for me. But that should also be information for a performer.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And sorry, one little tiny thing. What about people bringing, things when I sit behind the table and they're bringing their coats and their purse and their water bottle and they take it up to the piano, and I'm thinking, please leave the water bottle. It's 60 seconds, or or even if I hear 15-minute auditions, right, for classical. At any advice about that? Do you? I wanted that on record. Like,
no, I mean, again, everyone's going to have a different opinion, but I mean, usually in professional auditions, there are holding rooms where you can keep your stuff, and there's a monitor to keep track and make sure people's stuff is safe. But yeah, generally don't, because it's things that you cannot control. You drop your coat, and then you get nervous that you drop your coat, and you trip on it when you pick. I mean, you're setting yourself up for it. There are things that are just getting in the way of what you want that moment to be.
And that's another thing that Dave and I always tell students too is, as much as you're practicing everything for the day, add to that what you're going to wear, what you're going to bring. You have your basic to-go bag, right? It should start to be, all of that should be routine. You bring the same snacks, you bring the same water bottle, you bring the same change of clothes in your bag just in case, or extra set of tap shoes or whatever that is. Because if that is also part of the routine, then the morning before the audition is less stressful, because now oh, my stuff is here. I know what I'm going to wear. I know what my extra outfit is. Like, that is one less thing you need to think about, right? That's all just part of the day.
I love it. Oh, go ahead, David, please.
Yeah, no, it's so much of, I think, what we're talking about, whether it be adjustments or what Laura was just mentioning, it's like, our goal is to be as prepared as humanly possible so we can play in the space, right? So we can be present in the space. So it's improv, right? I mean, you have no clue of what's going to happen. But if you've done all that, if you've laid all that groundwork, the odds are in your favor that even if something goes quote unquote wrong, you're going to be able to run with it because you know enough is right that you're setting yourself up for success.
I love that. Well, that was a great opening conversation. Thank you. Now let's move to the next part that I know people will be eager to discuss is repertoire, right? That has such a profound impact on the audition itself. So let's start to unpack that a little bit. What advice do you have?
Well, as we've already said, repertoire selection speaks volumes about the performer. When they announce what they're going to sing, I'm already scanning and be like, well, that's an interesting choice, or like, oh, that's a really smart choice, right? Just based on how they appear in the room. Now, I'm always happy to be surprised, but I think again, choosing repertoire is and understanding who you are and what of yourself you want to show is the name of the game, and understanding, as we were saying earlier, how then that matches either the world of the musical you're auditioning for, or how that shows those adjudicating college auditions who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think David's saying that, when we're talking about showing who you are, I think the Frozen example was a really good one. But thinking about what I give my students, an activity where I ask them to write down 10 traits about themselves, and then ask them to ask 2 of their friends and 1 of their parents or caregivers as well, just to kind of get an idea of what trying to get at their essence, because often the younger performer won't even know like who I am. And I say, you know, I know this sounds kind of crass, but you really need to sort of think about yourself as a product to be marketed. And in the good sense of the word, like what am I bringing to this school, or what am I bringing to this audition that is uniquely me? And then once I have an idea about what those things are, I can be funny, I can be, you know, I can sing loud, I am kind of quirky, I don't think I'm sexy at all, I'm kind of nerdy. Like, okay, now we have this sort of picture of who you are. Now let's find material that does that. Because if the material does that, and then as you're chatting with them, you do that, I'm like, oh, I have a very clear picture of who this person is. So that's a very smart choice. So, you know, I can see through a bad audition choice. Often I do have to see through a bad audition choice. But when a performer brings in a piece that both shares their essence, but can also show me they've done some thinking about the show, like we're talking like a regional audition show, you know, if they're going to bring in a piece that not only shows me who they are, but also shows me, oh, I've done a little bit of thinking about the show and the world of the show and the musical world of the show, but also the musical idiom, but also the style of the show. So, you know, that shows me that they're a smart performer, that they took some time to really think about that. The other thing I will say about choice of song and repertoire is please make sure your song tells a story. I find a lot of people want to just sing at me, but I don't waste the opportunity to show me who you are as a performer. And by that, I mean your acting skills. So does your song start in one place and go on a journey? Does it bring you somewhere else? So you might want to make sure your cut is doing that, so that you, and if it doesn't do that, you know, if for whatever reason, like you have to bring, for example, a pop song or something like that, you need to put a journey on it so that you're also bringing that in as well as the musical world of the song.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something Laura said about, so like for professional auditions, well, actually, Laura, you had a really great example of a song that matched the tone of the musical and also the musical world. Do you want to just talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So I was doing, I directed the Bridges of Madison County earlier this year. And one of the women who came into audition brought in I Don't Need a Roof from Big Fish. So this was a really smart audition choice. And the reason is twofold. Number one, musically, that song is very similar stylistically to like a Jason Robert Brown song from that particular show, but also as a character, that female character in Big Fish has a parallel to Francesca in Bridges of Madison County. So it just showed me, oh, okay. So first of all, I could see the actress's, you know, musical styling. She had a beautiful voice. She had a nice range, but it also showed me, oh, she has this lovely ability to pick now this song, which is a smart choice. And now I know, oh, that's a smart actress to bring that song in, right? And her performance of the song, because it, you know, it did tell her cut, told me, took me on a nice journey. So that is an example of a great, you know, repertoire audition choice for that kind of audition.
And just maybe just to show another side of that, I was teaching a class at Wagner College that later became a book that Laura and I wrote called Performing Contemporary Musicals. And I gave a student's assignment, an assignment to come in for an audition for Fun Home, and by Jeannie Tesori and Lisa Crone, phenomenal musical. And one of the students came in with, they were specifically thinking of a particular character who identified as queer. And so they brought in I'm Coming Out, the disco song for the audition. And I, you know, lovingly told them, like, okay, so a couple of things. Like, first of all, that doesn't really, like, there's nothing in this musical that's disco related or disco adjacent. It's really, there's some 70s folk and 70s pop rock, like very much nods to the Partridge Family. So they're living in that musical world, right? But also, everyone in this show is can't say what they really want to say to each other, right? So like tone wise, it was like, you're not saying I'm coming out at all. It's like that's what unfortunately leads to one of the characters, taking their life. So it's being really smart about doing your research and understanding the world of the show, both musically and tone wise, and choosing material. You don't have to pick a song that's like, well, I'm going in for this character and this character would sing this song. Sometimes that works, but if you're matching the tone of the musical and in the musical world, it allows the creative team, one, as Laura said, to know that you're a smart performer, and two, to leave it open to see where they think you fit into the world of the show, and that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about, we oftentimes see, at least regionally, to bring contrasting songs. And what's interesting to me, music theater, when students will say music theater, that doesn't mean anything anymore. There isn't a single or even a binary aesthetic of music theater anymore. It is everything. It is the kitchen sink, right? And so when we used to think that, contrasting, well, maybe perhaps one legit and one contemporary music theater. But that's not always the case anymore. And that was a question mark. I said it like a statement. I'm asking a question. Can you talk to us about contrasting, and how is that a singular description, or is it really broader than that nowadays?
I think it probably depends on the audition, right? Like if it's like, so if I'm, for instance, if a college is asking for two contrasting songs, that's very different to me than you're going in for, it could be for a particular role or for a musical and they're asking for two contrasting songs, right? Like if you're going in for a particular musical, I would say that like both songs obviously should, as we have been saying, live in the world of the show, right? But maybe show slightly different sides of who you are and how you may show up in that musical, right? Whereas in, I think, a college audition, it will also, you're going to show two different sides of your essence, but it is going to be more like, this is my up-tempo and this is my ballad. This is, this is contemporary, this is my golden age. It may be that duality as well. Does that make sense?
It does. So let's say you have a singer that doesn't have a great head registration, doesn't sing legit super well, and they're wanting to get into college. You want to show them off. So then can you just pick two? You don't have to pick only contemporary. You could pick a golden age that is, I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair, right? But would that be a better focus, or contrasting tempos, both contemporary pieces, if that's more of their essence?
I think it really depends, because usually my experience has been that colleges are very clear about, they want something pre-1965 and something contemporary. So I would say, you do want to honor that, but I think the example you gave, Kari, yeah, absolutely. Why would you not? Like, you don't have to show your head voice. Like if that's something that is in development, as it is for many young folks, that's not something that you have to show. I mean, if for instance, if somebody came in and sang two songs that were more chest dominant, I'd be like, great. Can I just vocalize you up, into your head voice? Great. Okay, awesome. Just because I'd be curious, like, right. What do you don't have to show me up there in a song, but like, how do you live? And knowing that, like, okay, that's an area of growth for you. Awesome. We all have them.
Yeah, and I think two points that brings up for me. One is realizing that colleges are not looking for a finished product. So they are looking for someone that they can train. So they're looking to see what do you have to offer right now? So you want to show them the best of whatever that is. They're not looking for you to be, you're not auditioning for a regional theater production, right? You're auditioning to say, here's where I am, and I want your program to be able to help me, get better. So I do think it's important that you find things that you feel really good about, that students can feel really strong about, wherever that is. I do think it's smart for them to have other options. We haven't talked about, you know, the diversity of a book either, but I do think it's important for them to have several different things in there. And that could be, you know, maybe one of them is a pop song. Maybe one of them is, you know, I was in an audition. I went to, what the word is just escaped. Oh, Unified Auditions a few years ago. And I was in a room and this young woman came in and she obviously had a lovely voice. She was very, very nervous. And after a while, the professor who was adjudicating just said, you know what do you sing when you're in the shower? And she said, I sing a lot of Aretha Franklin. And so he said, can you just like pop out a little Aretha Franklin for me? And when the woman did that, it just, everything just let go. Like she was trying to do something that was in a box that was not her. And as soon as she did that, you could really feel who she was, you know? So, you know, have those things in your book. Have a few things that are, you know, maybe not what you think, because there have been times, certainly at a regional and also at a college audition, I've seen people say, what else do you have in your book? What else do you have in your book? You know, like they liked you, they heard something, but they want to hear a little more. So, you know, don't put it in your book if you're not willing to sing it in front of people. But, you know, if you've been working on things and you have a few different kinds of styles, absolutely have them in your book so that if they ask you, you can do that, you know, cuts or longer versions of the same song. That's always helpful.
Last year, I had a singer auditioning for Fifth Avenue. She has no musical theater experience, right? Fifth Avenue is one of our, you know, it's a top, very well-known national. And I said, you know, I said to her, she's phenomenal. She can sing music theater belt, but she does jazz singing with a group every week, and she's fantastic. And I said, listen, you have no experience music theater really. I'm so thrilled you're going for this audition. You're such a great singer. Just go and have fun. And, you know, they're not going to take you, they're not going to use you. So let's just start there and just so go have fun. And they had said, bring a contrasting, but bring something you love to sing. It doesn't have to be music theater. And I said, okay, then take your jazz piece and take, I think it was from Catch Me If You Can. And I said, and start with the jazz piece. And she went in and sang that. And they were like, well, who are you and where have you been? And she got called back for,
there you go. And I think that's more happening than not. So I do think that's really important. And I think for people to know, like, this is what makes me happy. Like, because I've asked that of people in an audition, like, what do you love to sing? You know, and so have that in your book. Absolutely. Even if it's not musical theater.
The other thing I just want to mention here may be helpful is that, you know, what I'm seeing in a lot of professional auditions for folks is they're being asked to sing something from their book, but then at the initial audition, they're being given like 10 pages of sides and 2 songs from the show to learn as well, which is like, I have very specific thoughts about that maybe I would share not on screen, but I just think that's it feels to me a little abusive of the performer. It just asks a tremendous amount of them, but that's the other thing that I'm seeing happen is that you know, a lot of performers, they may not even get a chance to sing a contrasting song because they're learning so much other repertoire from the actual show, because I feel like a lot of casting folks are just trying to like get it done as fast as possible, and that's unfortunately one way to do it.
Can you talk, David? I'm just thinking of your like 𝗚𝘂𝗀𝗃 story, because I feel like there's also something of like people learning, you know, learning the material and bringing their own essence to it. Because I feel like when people have to learn music quickly, there's also this, you know, this desire to listen to a YouTube clip or something else. And, you know, part of what we're trying to do is hear who you are, and we don't want to hear your imitation of another performer.
Yeah, I'm sure this is something we've all experienced. You know, you give a song to a student and you know, even provide tracks so they can learn it, so they don't have to listen to other recordings. And they come in, and I had a student who's now doing well for themselves, so I won't say who it is, but came in as a college student, and I gave them I'm Alive from Next to Normal, and they sang it for me in the next lesson. And I said, thank you, 𝗚𝘂𝗀𝗃, thank you so much. They just were like, what? I was like, I know You listen to the, because literally everything, and you know, we're musicians, we're tremendous mimics. You know, we hear things and we don't even know what we're processing, right? So like that's a it's indirect, but it does relate to the idea of like really understanding how to take apart a song, which is a whole nother topic. But how do you enter into your material, and how do you learn your material in a way that really allows you to be you?
What about songs that are oversung? We all hear this all the time. Like what currently are the songs that everybody should stay away from right November 2023? Besides
No one else.
No one else.
No one else from 𝗚𝘂𝗲𝗃𝗃. It's a beautiful song. And again, everyone's going to have a different opinion, right? There are some rooms that'll be like, oh, bring it. You know, there are, you know, for college auditions, certain colleges or institutions will publish a list of like, do not perform these songs. We do not want to hear Biff's monologue from Death of a Salesman. We've heard it 90,000 times. And therein lies why it's important to know. It's not that you can't necessarily perform it, but you have to know that, you know, especially in musical theater, you're probably going to be compared to the person that initially sang it, right? Because it's in the zeitgeist. And then you're also going to be compared to all of the people that sang it that day or within the last month that the person behind the table has heard, right? So it's not a, for me, I think probably for Laura and I, it's not a don't ever do, but it's take it under advisement, right? If you're going to choose to do that, there has to be a very specific reason for it, and you have to have a very specific point of view of the song that you feel is unique enough to stand out.
And I think that's a very good point. And I think another point about that is helping our students understand the difference between I love this song and this song says something about me. Because I think a lot of people want, oh, I love this song, I want to sing this. And I'm like, well, that's a great song, but why do you like that song? And why do you think you should sing this song for an audition? Because it doesn't really say anything about you. It's either age inappropriate, or it is overdone, or it's not really saying anything specifically about you. So just loving a song is not kind of a good reason for picking it. So I like to ask students why they want to do a specific song, especially if it's an overdone song, if there's something unique about it that speaks to them. If it does, then I think that's something that's okay. I also think it's really interesting when people, again, just like the Big Fish story, but I think, you know, students who are willing to sort of do the work and not just pick a song out of an anthology shows me, oh, you know, somebody did a little work to go find this unique song. You know, if somebody can come into those rooms and find a song that David and I haven't heard, that's like, wow, you know, or a rarely heard song or something, you know, that's again saying, oh, wow, I'm somebody who's taken the time to really select my material carefully because I think it says something about me.
Well, to that end, well, I was just going to say to that end, and I hope I say this correctly, we're living in a time where we're doing gender bending. We're doing, right? So does that mean if you're finding a song that's the essence of you, are we following archetype? We used to use the language of archetype anymore. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is going away. And I think, again, that's a really good thing, especially for our BIPOC colleagues, especially for our trans, non-binary, gender expansive colleagues. I think that's really, really powerful. And so, yeah, so it is. So I think there's a lot more flexibility and there's a lot more appetite in the industry to allow for different interpretations of songs, even if it doesn't match how the song was initially perceived or conceived. That's the word I was looking for.
So should we be encouraging our students that if they find a song, no matter who it was originally written for, and I mean by gender or by ethnicity or by, you know, should they, and it speaks to them, do they take it into an audition and think this is who I am and this speaks to me, and do they change the key if they need? And I'm not thinking college as much as.
Sure, professional. I mean, it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line. And so, yeah, which is a good song. But I would say, I think there's nothing ever wrong with an investigation of why do I feel like I show up in this material? The question of whether it's the right choice for an audition, to me, is another question, right?
Okay.
But I think the investigation of, I show up in this, what is it about this piece? What is it about how it's structured? What is it about the character, the action objective, the given circumstances of this song that I feel excited by and feel like I can live into, right? Regardless of, again, how it was conceived. I think that certainly roles where there are certain specific where the roles are written specifically with people of certain identities in mind, it's never, to me, it's never going to be okay if somebody sings Daddy's
Son.
Yeah. Like if just anyone sings Daddy's Son from Ragtime, that's not appropriate, right? That's appropriating, right? And so I think that's what I mean. Like there's a line, right?
Okay.
It's not that within the studio, if there's an interest in exploring that could be it's for an educational purpose. That's a different thing. But there does have to be a line there. In terms of what you were asking about the keys, when we interviewed people, mainly music directors and casting directors for our book, they were saying, look, we want, especially for trans non-binary folks, we want to encourage transposition of keys so people feel comfortable. Cisgender folks, there's an expectation that they can transpose the key like maybe a step or two in one direction. If you're going in for a particular role, like if you're going in for Dear and Hansen and you're seeing waving through a window and you're transposing it, there are question marks for the people behind the table, because it's like, well, if you're going in for that role, then why are you transposing that? Does that make sense? So it depends on what you're going in for, and I think it depends on what you're hoping to show.
Okay. Thank you for having that conversation with me and letting me ask my really simple questions. I
don't know if you can tell, I have turned red because it's something that's we're in a time where our industry has blatantly written out all of the work that a lot of the work that our colleagues who are considered minorities have given to us as part of this really great idiom, right? And so it behooves us all to just take a breath and to take a beat and think about how we're showing up for them and creating space for them, and while still understanding who we are and what we bring to a room. So it's a conversation we have to keep on having.
I like this idea too of, what we do in the studio to explore might be different than what we take to an audition. I know, I come from the training of opera, Indiana, and there was such gatekeeping of Bach and what you should and shouldn't sing. And during COVID in my studio, we did a concert online and I called it All Focked Up, FACAED, All Focked Up. And we had people, gender bending and faching all over the place. And it was just, and I thought, wow, I'm just so over gatekeeping. Now, and it's different if they're going to the Met auditions, right? And they're a coloratura, they have no business singing certainly something that's quite a different fach. But by and large, in the studio, and if these are singers that are maybe mostly singing regionally, they're not singing this with a big orchestra or all the other things that we consider, I just think, does that song speak to you? Then let's play with it and let's see what we learn about your instrument and how the voice might develop when you get to creatively and vocally explore something outside of the box you've been placed into. And it really changed my teaching profoundly, that experience as a result. And it was really fun. So this speaks to that in the music theater world, David, what you're talking about. No, I want to encourage our attendees. There's the question box, so please feel free to ask any questions. One other question that isn't on our list, but I've always been curious why in music theater tradition you never take in a song from the show being performed, but in the opera world, if they're singing or they're performing Rigoletto and you're a Gilda, take in Gilda, sorry. I mean, that's just how it's done. So I'm curious where that, do we know anything about why, besides somebody doesn't want to listen to the same song 500 times a day?
I think usually at first auditions you don't, because the logic being maybe that the creative team has a little more of an idea of what they might be looking for at that time. So I think at the beginning they're just sort of, and also I have to be honest, like when I'm auditioning someone, I don't go in with a preconceived notion of every role. I kind of have a general idea, but I'm very open to what's coming in the room. And I really like when somebody can bring something that's outside of what my initial thought might be of the material, you know, realizing that I've spent months, possibly even years, with this material prior to the auditions going on. So I know that material inside and out. So as a first impression, that might not be what you want to walk in with. Maybe you want to show me something else about yourself first. I am going to have you sing that material later, but show me what else you have first that might give me some other thoughts. So I think that's probably why. Otherwise, I mean, if someone asks me, is it okay if I sing it? I'm always going to say, sure. You know, it's not like it's verboten, but I think doing something that sort of shows the style of the show is usually a smarter choice, though.
I think, you know, I have seen casting calls where they invite people to sing from the show.
Yeah, okay.
And I just find that it can if you do that, to me, I'm like, oh, you want to be this person. Well, and that's a gamble to me. It's like, I may not see you as this character, right? And so you're gambling that I'm going to be open to seeing you as somebody else, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, to me, why we don't generally do that.
Okay, interesting. We have a question. Thank you. The UNA SNATS chapter is here watching. Woohoo! Thank you. And a question from a student. What are some of the overdone songs for tenor and other voice types?
Oh, of course, all of the songs I've ever known
have just left your head.
Gosh.
You just said Dear Evan Hansen. I would definitely.
Yeah, I would Waving Through a Window. I would definitely not bring that in. I mean, certainly anything that's currently running on Broadway is usually a good idea to avoid.
Remember back in the day, the On My Own, no. Frozen when it came out, no.
If it's in an anthology of most popular songs, that song should not be sung. And that's an overdone song. Probably.
The other thing, this is, and apologies because this is not directly answering the question, but one of the things that we also wanted to lift up is that so often we're seeing in auditions of all different kinds that the repertoire that's brought in is by and large written by white cisgender men, right? And so I know Paul Patinka wrote this really fantastic article in Intranos in 2021, and they analyzed the NATS National Student Auditions repertoire, and what they found was that 96% of the material was written by white cisgender men, and 36% I think were living at the publishing of that article, right? So there's so much repertoire out there, and so while there are overdone songs, I also just want to advocate for writers of lots of different intersections of identity. And this is not at all meant to be a plug. There are many, many different resources, but if you would like, you can go to my website, davidsisco.com/teaching, and you will find there a list, an incomplete list of musicals written by BIPOC musical theater writers from Shuffle Along to today, and also musicals written by trans and non-binary and gender expansive folks. There's so much rep out there that is available. You'll also find in that document, I've listed living writers, I've listed their website, examples of their music, and all of their social media links. So you can follow them and start to find repertoire that is not oversung.
Thank you, David. So as here we are at the top of the hour, but now people are asking some questions. So there's 3 questions. Let's see what we can do because they look really good. Meryl asks, what is typically the time frame that is considered contemporary music theater these days? For example, when an audition requires 16 bars of contemporary music theater piece.
People argue about when that started, but where do you want to draw the line today, David?
I mean, I say in the last 10 to 15 years is what I would consider contemporary musical theater. And so, but I would also say it depends on the audition. Like if you're going for, you know, I'm trying to think of an example, like what I would call like contemporary classic music theater show. I think that there's like Light in the Piazza is the first thing that comes to my mind, right? There's going to be some flexibility in terms of what years we're talking about.
And also we should know that like the contemporary musical theater is like a huge, you know, Dave and I call it a golf umbrella, because there's like, you know, there can be everything from Light in the Piazza to, you know, things that are more pop rock based or country based, or, you know, there's a big world of that. So there's a lot of things under that umbrella that would all fall into contemporary, and some of them are going to sound like, you know, Light in the Piazza, which sounds more like what we used to call like a legit or golden oldie kind of score, versus things that are more pop, maybe like a Jason Robert Brown show. So it also depends what you're trying, you know, what kind of contemporary you're looking for.
I'd say follow the breakdown. And so sometimes the breakdowns are not particularly well written, but if you read, you know, if you at least read the synopsis of the show or get a sense of the show, that's going to guide you into knowing kind of where it is. You know, we're also in the midst of contemporary musical theater, so it's anyone's guess how historians are going to classify it. So I would say just follow the breakdown of where you feel it lives in the world of the show.
Okay. Megan asks, would you recommend having different copies of the full 32-bar/16 bar cuts in your book rather than making different starting marks on the songs?
I would have, yes, go ahead, David, you're gonna say that.
Yes.
Yeah, you wanna have like your 16 bar cut, you wanna have your 32 bar cut, and you also wanna have the whole song, because plenty of times you'll sing that 16 bars and I'll say like, wow, that was great. Do you have the whole song? Know the whole song. That's the first thing.
Yes.
For all of your 16 bar cuts, know the whole song. And then yes, have different lengths of it, because different auditions are going to ask for different things. So as long as you're working on it, learn it in different versions. And that's really great to have in your book. And again, make sure if it's in your book, you know it. Yeah,
But separate copies. So one,
separate,
you know, you've got your
yes.
16 and then another tab, and you've got, okay, that I just want to make sure.
Simple for the pianist. The pianist is your friend if you make them your friend. So
I recommend like not going crazy with the highlighter, but like highlighting the start and highlighting the end. And so in that sense, like having one piece of music that does multiple things, it's just too much for the pianist to read, I would say.
Okay, 2 more questions. They're good. So Kathy has asked, can you say more about the move in the industry to stay away from typing actors? Is that language not used anymore?
It's something that is, I think, slowly going away, and it started in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, and I think that really sparked an opportunity for people to have a conversation, a long overdue conversation about equity and inclusion in the theater. So yes, I think generally people are going are kind of doing away with character type in the way that we think about it, you know. And again, you know, this is something that we talk about in our book. Like, if you look at, for example, the character type of an ingenue, right? If we look at some of the major ingenue roles, Maria in Sound of Music, I'm thinking of
Carousel?
Sorry?
Were you saying Carousel? Sorry, I'm trying
no,
to think.
Christine Daae, right?
Oh, okay. Phantom.
Phantom, right? Clara in Light in the Piazza. Look at the female identifying folks who have played those roles. They're almost always white, cisgender, female identifying folks, right? So that's been the problem with character type, right? Is it's been used to gatekeep certain folks of identity out. So so yes, for those reasons, I think a lot of it has gone away. Now that's, you know, in regional theaters you may find something different, but I think within the Broadway community, that's something I feel like a lot of people are really trying to avoid for those reasons.
Which also, I will just say quickly, tagging on to that, is the other reason why you need to figure out what your essence is and what you're bringing into a room. Because if you're not bringing a type, right, we want to know what essence you have and how I can apply that to this character. If I haven't predetermined what kind of actress is going to play this kind of role, then if you bring in, whatever you bring in might be something I can add to this character, because that character is, you know, you're going to be the other piece of that. So that's the benefit of not having type, which is you are that missing piece. So you need to show me what your essence is.
And most breakdowns now are saying any gender, any you know, any race, right? Yes. So that's, and for those exact reasons.
Yeah, love that. I mean, it really is such a paradigm shift. It's extraordinary. It's wonderful. Another question from the UNA SNATS chapter, if time allows. What resources would you recommend for collegiate singers looking for training, pre-professional and professional opportunities, particularly in the summer?
I mean, collegiate programs are really, I don't want to name like anyone in particular, but I will say college programs, if they can be afforded, I mean, some of them are expensive. They do have scholarship programs. The benefit of those is obviously being on a college campus, getting to experience that, and often the faculty who are teaching them are the people who are going to be adjudicating. So that is certainly a benefit, not to mention, of course, the training that you're going to get. But I think any experience is good experience. And by that, I mean, you know, you can do that as a regional theater. You can do that at a community theater. You can do that by just taking dance classes and voice classes and whatever. Experience is experience, you know what I mean? So it can be whatever that student can afford in whatever location they are. It doesn't need to be expensive, because I feel like there was this move a few years back where there were a lot of very expensive college prep training programs that were kind of turning out college prepped students, you know what I mean? And I feel like if you can go to a program where you feel like it's going to, you know, if you say something I want to work on this summer as a student is, I think I need some more voice training. I think I need some more dance training. I think I need some more acting training. I think I need to expand and see what other kinds of theater are out there. Then find a program that speaks to that. And that will be good experience. That's something you can put on your college resume, you know, your resume for college. It doesn't need to be an expensive program for you to get good experience.
I love that. Thank you. Well, any last words from either of you? Anything that you really, a kernel of something you wanted to share, or any last bits of advice for our membership?
I would just say it's so important for those of us who are teachers, helping students prepare for auditions or clients, just to remind them that they're helping the people behind the table solve a problem. That's like, if we're looking for performers for a show, we want the person to be good. Like it's like, oh, please solve our problem. Please help us figure out how we're going to do this, right? And so I think that that's the the main thing is to claim your agency. And I think teachers can claim their agency too. We have just as much impact on I literally just came to this thought this week that I have, for the last 20 years that I've been teaching, been trying to keep an eye on like, what's the industry doing? How can I bring that to my studio to make sure I provide context for my students? That's important. That is important, but also we as teachers can really positively impact our industry, right? And so how can we prepare our students to how can we do that through our students, right? So I think one of the ways is giving them the agency and knowing that that the people behind the table, for the most part, not everyone, but are good-willed and want them to succeed and want them to be the answer to their problem.
Wonderful. I love that.
I would just say, don't spend, when we're working with students, to tell them that they are enough, that whatever that means, they should not try to be something they are not. It is better to spend that time thinking about who they are and what they bring and what their gifts are that they bring and want to show, whether that be a professional audition or a college audition. Bring that into the room, learn how to be present in the room, be kind, and then also be brave. I think a lot of students in audition situations and professionals are scared to be brave in a room. And what I mean by that is, take chances, take choices, do things in the room with the material when something is asked of you, be brave. And just be kind to yourself, be kind to your students, be kind to the people when you're at an audition, because kindness counts and people can see that. So that's my final word, is that you are enough.
Oh, you two are wonderful. Speaking of kind, David Sisco and Laura Josepher, thank you so much for this conversation tonight, and even going into some, tough bits of a conversation of our industry. It's very, very appreciated. So thank you very much for your generosity of your time for this tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kari, and thanks to everyone who joined us.
And I hope I'll see both of you in New York at the New York NATS workshop in January. So I'll be coming this year. So I look forward to seeing you both, I hope, in person. So, well, everyone, have a wonderful Thanksgiving in the meantime. And on December 10th, I will be hosting Dr. Leslie Childs, a fabulous laryngologist in Texas who has been doing lots of research on singers with injured voices. And so she's going to come on and share with us about that and about vocal health, all things vocal health for the singers. So I hope you'll join us then, and be well until then. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.